Welcome back. With 2007 Saturn Aura here. It's got an intermittent battery light. Going down the road, it'll come on, go off, come on and go off. Sitting at idle doesn't seem to happen. Pretty much make it go away if you're driving down the road and you kind of step on a little bit, give it a little more RPMs, it goes off. I thought initially the alternator might be going bad. Had it tested, battery load tested and the alternator tested. They tested out okay. And I'm going to show you what I found. So when I got this car back and got it in here after driving it, I opened the hood and I looked, and this is what I'm seeing. So you can see there's been some visitors in this engine compartment, and I'm guessing, knowing how these visitors tend to like wires, that they've chewed some wires somewhere. So we're going to pull that nest out of there. And I don't know if you can see that, but back in the inner fender they're back in there. Bunch of little seeds and stuff back in there. And we're going to see if we can find out if they chewed some wires somewhere. We're going to do a voltage drop test on the alternator, between the battery and the alternator, just to make sure that that wiring's okay. And then we're going to see if we can find out if it's actually the rodents that are in here have chewed the wires up somewhere, and that's causing our intermittent problem. Now we're just going to pull this out of here. I'm not reaching in there with my hand because it's very possible that they're still in here somewhere. So I don't need to reach in there and get bit by something. I'm just going to reach in there and pull out that little nest they got going on. And I'm going to pull this cover off this battery. See, they've been in there. And do a voltage drop test on this alternator. Let's see if we can determine that that's okay. Just doing a little quick visual inspection just to see. I can see that they've been up front where all these wires are. There's nuts and stuff in here, trees, and I know that's where the alternator runs into the ECM. You can see on this, they've been crawling around all over on the top of this. Yeah, they've been underneath of it. It's right in here. It's seeds and stuff all over the place. They've been underneath the cover, the acorns in the back. They've been all over this thing. More evidence. Look in here, just acorns, and these guys are having a good time. For the voltage drop, test this. I want to go from positive to positive, and the output of the alternator to the positive side of the battery, and I'm going to do the same thing from the housing of the alternator to the negative side. You have to have a load across it when you're doing it, otherwise you kind of can't do a voltage drop test. So we'll run the engine, let it run, and then we'll see what we got here. So I'm going to go from this output terminal here on the alternator, and I'm going to go and put my voltmeter between that output terminal and the positive side of the battery while the engine's running, and we're going to see what kind of voltage drop we get across that. And then we're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to go up the housing of the alternator, probably right around one of those fins, and run it to the negative side of the battery and do the same thing. And we're going to test, see if we've got a problem between the wire. That'll tell us, if that turns out okay, that the wiring between the alternator and the battery is okay. There's not an issue with it. Yes, I've got the car running. Just real quick, going to run this across the battery. See if on 20 volt scale, it's charging the battery at about 14 and a half volts. It's pretty good. It's definitely charging the battery right now. It's interesting. It's 13. It's kind of moving around. 13 and a half, 14 and a half. Make sure that's not connection here. About 14 and a half volts. That's good. So I'm looking at testing between the output terminal of the alternator, the positive side of the battery. And I have 0.18 volts. 0.15. That's fine. I want it to be less than 0.5. If you have 0.5 or above, you got a problem in the wiring. You shouldn't have that much voltage drop between it. So that side's good. So I'm going to do the same thing in the housing of the alternator to the negative side of the battery. Right on the housing of the alternator, making sure I have a good connection here. That's 0.01, which means it's fine. It's what I kind of expect. So the wiring between the alternator and the battery is fine. Well, what I initially thought might be a little rodent problem and some chewing on some wires, doesn't look like it is. I went through the harness in relation to the alternator and really the harness in general, just visual inspection, both up top where it connects to the ECM as well as underneath the car. And I don't see any damage at all from rodents. What I did do was I left my meter hooked to the battery and drove this. At idle, the voltage from the alternator looks good. But going down the road, what I noticed was that the voltage wasn't low, but it would jump up and it would fluctuate. It was jumping up to 17.5 volts and causing all kinds of problems on the dash and you know, throwing codes. And so I'm pretty sure it's the voltage regulator in the alternator that's causing the issue. The one thing I can't test because I don't have a graphing multimeter or a scanner with a scope in it is back probing the signal, the duty signal from the ECM. Pretty sure that it's the alternator and not that, but there's always a chance if you have a scope that you can look at that signal as a square wave signal that comes out of there and look at that duty cycle that's being communicated between the ECM and the alternator. You should do that. I can't because I don't have that equipment. It's on my list, but I don't have it yet. So we're going to pull this alternator and replace it. I believe 95% that that's what this issue is. This car has about 103,000, 104,000 miles on it. And we're going to see if that fixes the problem. But like I said before, what I saw was really high voltage going down the road. When I was driving this, it leads me to believe there's a voltage regulator problem in the alternator. So we're going to pull it out and replace it. Just going to take the covers, things like that, off the top of this engine, get them out of the way. Disconnect the battery. Definitely disconnect the battery first. We'll do that. We're going to have to pull this intake, this air intake, and disconnect it from the throttle body. There's one 10mm bolt up front. We're going to take that out. This is right in the way. When we take that out, we should be able to get to this alternator pretty easily. CD valve. So there you can see the back of the alternator. right up in here on this side. Looks like a hose that's sitting in there, a couple bolts here. I'm guessing one underneath. Let's just get the electrical connector off the back of this first. Get that out of the way and disconnect the output from it. It looks like 13 millimeter maybe. This electrical connector, we'll just put that aside. Got our electrical connectors off of there. Right down there, there's the tensioner. You can see it's like a 1/2 inch square. You put a 1/2 inch breaker bar or a ratchet in there. Release that tension on this belt so we can get this belt off of that pulley that goes to the alternator and get this out of here. That air box was sitting right in here, so there's only about maybe that much room when that air box is in here. You can't get my hand in there, so it's a lot easier to do if you just take that out. It takes all of a minute. I have the tool for this, so I'm just going to try to use it and see if it'll be easier with the tool. Might be. If not, I'll just use a ratchet. Thank you. So this tensioner pulley is really a little harder to get to than you think. I have the tool. Very difficult to move that with just a standard ratchet. Hard to get it in there. You only have maybe an inch and a half maybe between this inside of the frame here and the unibody and that tensioner. So I was able to get the tool. I had to put it in the back of it and move it towards the front. Just move this towards the front a little bit, and that lets me release this belt. I'm not going to take the belt off. I don't want to have to weasel it all the way back through all these pulleys, and I'll just leave that there. So now the alternator, let me show you this alternator pulley right there is now free. Let's see if we can get this. This hose is just on a bracket there. I believe they're 15 millimeter. Okay, see if we can get a long wrench in here. I believe these are 15 millimeter. That's what they look like. Yeah, they're 15. Break that loose. Long handle wrench here. There it goes. Another one buried back here. It's just this hose is just not taking that hose off. No reason to. The nice thing about these extra long wrenches, when you need one, you need that leverage. It's kind of nice. Alright, that's loose. One down. One to go. Hose kind of a little bit in the way, but not really. This hose is just, you put it more in the way? I don't think you could. I actually thought this video might be a little more interesting because of the rodents involved, but turns out the rodents didn't do any damage that I can find. Just a problem with the alternator. The idler pulley bolt holds the bottom of the alternator. Let me show you that. I'm going to try to tell you. Now I'm looking for a bolt pushing in from the front, but actually, right there, that idler pulley bolt going through the middle of that idler pulley is actually going through and holding the bottom of the alternator to the engine. So, obviously, we're going to take that off. Looks like 15 millimeter as well. It's going okay. It's out. Okay, got my new alternator. Got the wrong one originally, but went back and got the right one. Well, I didn't have to go back. I knew it as soon as I picked it up because I checked it against the one I had. So we're going to fish this back in here. Got to learn to put it in there the right way. I have to start the bottom one first, even though I don't want to. I don't have a choice. The bolt's actually hitting against the frame and there's not enough clearance with it in place to get it started in the hole. So I'm going to have to do the idler pulley first. Put the bottom idler pulley bolt in first, otherwise I won't be able to get it started. I got it started in place, and I start one of the top ones here now. you see on this, hopefully you can see this, there's a little slot that fits into the casting on the bracket for the alternator. So you've actually got to line that hose clamp up before you and get it kind of lined up in there in the right kind of the right orientation before you go to put it on. Otherwise you won't get it on there. Now you have it in the right orientation. It's hard to get at the bolt. That little holder for the hose is in the way. So you get to fight with that. Front one started here. I'm just running up against the edge of the alternator here, and the ratchet doesn't really have room to use the ratchet and wrench anymore, so we'll just finish it up with the 15mm long wrench, extra long wrench. Okay. Remember, output from the alternator. We're going to hook that back up. Put that back on there. And our electrical connector, just plug that back in. Make sure it clips into place. Now we're going to do the serpentine belt. I'm not really going to show you that. You just got to run it back on there. Let's put the air box back in over here. Okay. This bolt's really long. It's like 2 inches long. Okay. There's a little bump out here on this air filter, so it can only go one way. Probably why they have it like that, so you can't do it the wrong way. All right, it's two kind of hooks on the front of this. You just slide them under those hooks and just clip this in place. That's done. The electrical connector, don't forget that. Click that back on, and we're going to put this back in place. So there's that PCV valve by the throttle body, which, yes, you can see, kinda. Right there, which was disconnected when I first took this off. So we're going to hook that back up. 10mm bolt here in the front. Right here in the front, I'm going to start that just to kind of hold this in place. Front of the throttle body, hook that back up. PCV valve, the line to that, hook that back up. Hook this side up to the air box. It's an 8mm nut on the air box, but I'm just going to use a screwdriver. Tighten them up. Back on, we'll tighten this 10mm bolt back up. Just going to put the covers back on. So everything's hooked back up. We'll just check everything, make sure we didn't forget anything. Got the electrical connector to the airbox back on, electrical connector to the back of the alternator, the output. Just connect it back up. Then we're just going to put the covers back on. I'm going to have to test this. I'm going to run this engine. I'm going to put a meter on it while we run it. I'm going to run my meter inside so I can rev it, and get some RPMs on it to see whether or not it has a problem. Because when I initially looked at this at idle, it looked fine. But when you drove down the road and the RPMs come up and you put a load on it, that's when it's really started having a problem. So we'll do the same thing to test. Pretty much at idle right now. Just backing out of the garage. We're going to take it out for a little test drive and see what the voltage does. It was all over the place before. I did not videotape that, but it was going up to 17.5 volts, which is not good at all for electronics. So we're going to take it down the road and see what it does here. Hopefully we are done and it is fixed. Right now, looks pretty solid. I mean, you obviously I didn't videotape this before, but before, just doing this, just going down the driveway and going on the road, it would be all over the place. It has not moved at all, which is really good. This is just steady on 14.4 volts that it's outputting. That's really good. That's what we want to see. Hold it. Just make sure it's not frozen. 14.3 volts. I'm hoping it stays that way. We'll know in a minute. Looks much better. It's not jumping all over the place. But it certainly seems that the regulator and the alternator was bad. It's pretty solid right now. Alright, so that's basically verification that it was the voltage regulator in the alternator that was bad. Well, that's it. You can see that it stayed right at 14.3, 14.4 volts, which is about where I'd expect it to fluctuate a little bit, depending on what you're running in the car. But it was solid before. It was all over the place, just up to 17.5 volts, really causing all kinds of issues. So pretty simple. Probably take an hour, maybe a little more than that, to actually do the alternator and test it, make sure everything's working right. I wish I had a bidirectional scanner and a higher end scanner and a scope because to really tell whether or not it is the PCM or it is the alternator, you need to look at the signal and the communication between the PCM and the alternator. That's the only way to really know if it's the voltage regulator in the alternator or PCM's having an issue. It's much rarer that the PCM is going to have that issue, but and in this case, fortunately, it was the alternator. The person who owns this car took it to an auto parts store, and they ran a test on it, but you didn't really see an issue with the alternator until you're driving down the road. At idle, like I said initially, it looked fine. The voltage was steady, but it was going down the road is when you really saw the issue. So if you run into this issue, I hope this helps you out. If you like the video, subscribe below. Thanks for watching.